Hello people, how are you doing? Welcome back to another video of the React series. Today we are going to discuss about higher order components. I have got few requests about explaining higher order components, so I thought why not explaining something very ground up. Starting with some small examples, small real life examples, and then getting into the code. So in this video, you will be learning in and out about higher order components. I'm sure at the end of it, you really don't have to refer anything else to understand this concept better. One quick thing is, before we get started, I want to request you to subscribe to this channel because I keep sharing a lot of good content from my experience that will be useful to you. Alright, so without any further delay, let's get started with React higher order components. Understanding higher order components is really easy when you understand it with right examples. And what we are going to do now, we are going to understand this topic with some real life examples, some easy to understand examples, so that you will never ever going to forget about higher order components. Okay, so let's get started with those examples right away. So first thing that we are going to do, this particular example, just look into this. What we see over here, we are seeing bunch of shapes. So we have a square over here, which is a blue color. Then we have a star, which is a green color, and then we have an oval, which is a yellow color. Okay, now let's imagine there is a bar in between. The bar is called turning red. Okay, I have given this name, turning red. What it does basically, it turns each of the shape color to red. So irrespective of the shape and irrespective of the color that gets as an input to this turning red slab, it turns out to become red in color. So square become red, star become red, oval become red. So this is the purpose of this one. Now think about a situation, if you have to write the programming logic for doing this, turning the color of the shape to red color, and if you have to do it for individual shape, you will be writing the logic inside this shape, you will be writing the same logic inside this, you will be writing the same logic inside this. So it means the same logic, what you are writing 3 different times. To do what? To enhance a property of each of this shape, which is nothing but the color, enhancing from his existing color to red color. Instead of that, if I can take out that piece of logic, that piece of common logic into a centralized place, right? And I wrap our shapes with this particular logic, then the output that we will be getting is the one that we are looking for, the changing the color to red. At the same time, the logic we are not actually coupling with each of this shape, rather we are keeping it in a common place so that we can reuse. Now here you notice I have actually taken few terms, right? The first term that I have taken is called reuse. So we are talking about reusability. Reusability means you write once and try to utilize it, try to reuse it, again and again. So that is the reusability. And the second term that I have used called enhancing an attribute. So enhancing an attribute in the sense, enhance the attribute of this guy and this guy, the attribute is color, to something called red. So keep these two terminology in mind, because when you talk about higher order component, we'll be using these two terminology, reusability and enhancing things again and again. Okay, so I hope this particular example was crystal clear to you. Now in the perspective of this example, the left side things and the right side things we can actually call with certain name. So let's come to the React paradigm. In React paradigm, we can think this as a component. We can also think this as a component. We can think this also as a component. So the left side one, we can talk about the input components. Okay, we'll name it as input components for now. And the right side piece, we'll name it as output or the enhanced components. And this is the reusable code that we spoke about it. So in React terms now, if I come, these are the components and in between there are some reusable code. The reusable code can wrap these input components to create an enhanced component. This is a very basic concept of higher order components in React, right? So in higher order component, in terms of higher order component, what we do is like we can actually supply some input component to something. That something is nothing but a higher order component. We'll get into that, to get an output of an enhanced component. Now think about it. This is a component which is having an attribute called color equals to blue. And then if I wrap this component with a reusable code or the higher order component, the output that I am going to get is the color change to red. So I have enhanced this component. This is a very basic concept, very fundamental concept of higher order component. And that's what we learn in a series like this, where we learn things practically. Now the second example what I'm going to take, it's little complex, but I'm sure that you will have a lot of fun with it. So now let's think about the programming world, our day-to-day app building work. So what we do here is like, I have a database which stores some data about movies. If you are a movie lover, I'm sure that you're going to love this example. So it has some movie details like, the movie name, who is the director, what is the length of this movie, how much star it got, how much money it earned, what is the cover image of this, every information that is stored in this particular database. That is great. Now let's say that I want to kind of display each of these movie details like this card view into my page. So this is one component that I can think about it. So the component that I'm thinking over here is like each of these small boxes is one of the movie details that I'm going to show with the cover image and probably the name and things like that I'm going to show in terms of card view over here. So that is my objective. And so I have created a simple movie list component, a skeleton component which is having only the JSX part at this point of time, and the data to kind of show the actual movie details are lying in the data storage somewhere in some database that I have to fetch and I have to show. Now if you all following this series, you would have already started relating it like how to do it with the use state, use effect, things like that with the fetch and all. I'm sure that you have started thinking about this, and that's a great thing. Okay, good. So next is, let's talk about one more thing. So what I'm looking for it, like whenever I'm able to fetch the data, I'll be able to show all the movie details in each of these cards. This is what I am trying to look for. So one way I can do is like I write an API. Using this API, I fetch the data and then push the data as a prop to this kind of skeleton movie list component, which you also call a dumb component or the presentational component. And with the data, I get this movie list completely got populated with the movie details. Great. Awesome. Now the next moment, my requirement changes a bit. What I am looking for now, I am looking for another view. I am looking for another component, which is instead of a, this card based component, it is a tabular data. It's a tabular component, which is going to show a different kind of data, a little bit different kind of data in terms of showing the movie analytics. And it is going to show the numbers like this. However, the data that it is showing, it is coming from the same data storage, same table from the same data. Only thing is like it is got computed and it is showing some kind of analytics. Like for this director, made this many movies, the total runtime is this much, this is the rating, and this is the kind of earning that particular movie has. But all this data, even this data, this cover image and all this data are stored in the data store. Now to show this one, I am doing the fetch from here to here and then showing this one. Similarly, I can always do data fetching from the store to this component, pass it as a props and can show this one. But did you realize that in this case, I am going to duplicate the effort of data fetching in both the components? I am going to do in the movie list component, I am going to do in the movie analytics component, and that is really pain because tomorrow there is another component comes which want to show the movie details in a different way, maybe with some kind of visualization. It has to again fetch into that component. And why to do that? Just copying the same fetch code 3 times in 3 different places. For that, what I can do, I can actually try certain things. For example, let us think about something sitting in between. Okay, something common sitting in between. And this common part can fetch the data from the movie database. And after fetching the data, it is going to show or help showing the things into a respective component. So after fetching this data, what this particular component can do is component can make this data available to this particular dumb component or the presentational component. Now this presentational component can fetch the data from here. Basically it can get the data from here because this the middleman has already fetched it from the database, so it is easy to access, and after that it is able to show the details basically of for all the movies. Similarly, what is this analytics component going to do? Analytics component is again going to make use of this data and it is going to show the movie analytics over here. So the biggest advantage that we have here, the fetching part, the fetching code, we are not duplicating in either of this component. We are keeping it somewhere centralized, and we are using the data after fetching to pass to this component, and utilizing this data into each of this component. Okay, so this is the overall story so far. Now, what are each of these things called? Let's talk about that. This central one is called higher order components. Okay, the center one is called higher order components. The job of a higher order component is to take a component as an input and output another component which is like an enhanced component. So the component that it takes as an input is called a wrapped component, and the component that it returns in return is called the enhanced component. The higher order component in React is nothing but a plain JavaScript function. Okay, it's a plain JavaScript function that takes a component as an argument and return a new enhanced component as a return value. As simple as that. Okay, so this is really not a rocket science. This is a very simple thing. It's a mere JavaScript function that takes one component as an argument and returns a new component in the enhanced fashion. The example that we have seen here, this movie example that we have seen here, it demonstrates that it has enhanced this particular component. It has taken the component as an input and returned the enhanced component with the data. Similar thing happening at the right side as well. So I hope that with this example, you are now able to understand what exactly higher order component is and what it is for. So the syntax for a higher order component is as simple as this. I told higher order component is a plain JavaScript function. So a JavaScript function has a name. So you can name your higher order component with any name. I have given HOC here. You can actually give any name of your choice. And what it takes basically, it takes another one component as an input. So why I have this parenthesis. So this is the input component, and what it returns. In return, it returns a new enhanced component. That is what we are going to use elsewhere. So if you take this particular example or the couple of examples that we have given and this particular syntax, I'm sure that you are now will be able to kind of relate to it very well. Any question comes around higher order component, what exactly higher order component is, why it is used, how we can make use, you will be able to answer each of these questions very well. So if you have understood the explanation so far, it will be very easier for you to even pick up the code examples, right? So what we learned from the definition so far is like higher order component is nothing but a plain JavaScript function that takes one argument, and the argument is a React component, and what it returns a new enhanced component. So what we see over here, we have created a higher order component that I am going to take you step by step in every step. Don't worry about it. Like if you have never seen it before, you will understand it completely. So first thing I have done is like I have created a plain JavaScript function, const with fetch, takes an argument called wrapped component. It's an arrow function and it has some body inside it that will get in very soon. Now the name is like with fetch because we are going to fetch certain movie data into it and then going to return a new enhanced component. You can name it anything. This is a naming convention that in general people use for higher order component. They start with an with, right? That is a naming convention, but not necessarily you have to follow. So now we'll go step by step. If I expand it, the next few things that we are going to see over here, there is something called a class which extend react.component. Now so far in this series we have seen like functional component. We used to create component using functions, but most of the usages of higher order component is prior to the React hooks, the existence of React hook. People used to use higher order component a lot, and that is the time they used to create components using classes. Nowadays people don't use classes to create component, they use functions to do, but you may work in some kind of legacy code where you will be seeing components are created with classes. So I thought touch base in this case, the creating component using class. That's what we're showing. A class name is with fetch. Again, you can name it anything. I just try to keep it in the same name, but see the difference here. The class name starts with a capital case. That's the convention, and it extends something called react.component. Okay, so far with me, great. Now what it does, we told that What we are doing in the higher order component is a simple function that takes one component as an input and return a newly enhanced component. So if you're seeing here, it is returning this with fetch component that we have created, with fetch class component that we have created. Ignore this line for a moment. Now with fetch, this component will be created. So it means that this component, if you are creating, we have to see what exactly happening inside this component. This is where all the magic happen. For the higher order component, we are returning a new enhanced component. So what kind of enhancement we are doing using this, and what kind of enhancement we are applying in on the input component, that's what we're going to see. So I am going to expand this one now. So if I expand this one, I see three major things. One is like there is something called constructor, there's something called component did mount, and there's something called render. So if you are creating a component using class component, not using function component, things work little bit differently, but conceptually they are mostly same. So in the class component also, you have things like props and state as we have in the functional component. So if we are passing or trying to pass any kind of props like properties to this component, you have to pass it using constructor, and all the states you have to initialize inside constructor. In functional component, we do it using useState. We know that useState hook. So if I expand this, what I'll see, I am first initializing the props using the super. Super means it is calling the constructor of the parent class, which is like react.component, right? That is provided by React. And then what we are doing, we are actually initializing a state variable called movies, right? And initializing with an empty array. And in the class component, if you want to kind of create a state, you have to create it as a JavaScript object. That object name you can give anything. If you give state, you have to set the value of the state using the setState method that is provided by React automatically. Okay, so this is how we have now defined the props and state. Next thing that comes is the component did mount. In functional component, we have seen things like use effect, which handles side effects. Now, based on the different dependencies we pass to it, like state, props, or any sort of dependency we pass to it, the use state lifecycle actually changes based on what it actually measures that there is a side effect or not. Similarly, the React class components are having certain lifecycle methods, so that on those lifecycle methods, when these methods get invoked, you can do certain things. Component did mount one of the method that actually makes sure that your component is completely mounted, and inside this function, whatever code you write, that is going to get executed right after the component mount is successful. Now our objective with this with fetch component is like we are going to make a call to the movie database using an API to fetch the movie data, right? So once the component is kind of mounted, what we are going to do, we are going to make a fetch call. So here we are making a fetch call using this particular API that I have created, which is going to give you the movies information. Fetch actually returns promises, so we are using then we are calling response.json, which return another promises. Then we are calling then, which returns the data, and once I have the data, I am using the dot set state, to set the state value to this movie state over here. So now data.movies is having this array, movie array, which is got set. Now at this point of time, when this component did mount call successfully done, these promises are returned and resolved successfully, the movies will have all the movies data. So this part is clear. Now the last part is about the render. So in the functional component, when you want to use JSX and return the JSX from the component, you do it inside the return. In this case, you do inside the return function, render function, and inside render function, you do a return. So here everything that we write is pure JSX, but I want you to pay special attention over here what we are doing. In this render of the component with fetch component, class component, we are actually now using the component that we are passing. Okay, and this is where the enhancing happening. So taking this component and the data that we have fetched, we are using this data as a props, this dot state dot movies, and actually adding a new props value to this input component. Okay, so how this component, this with fetch component enhancing this wrapped component is the with fetch component making an API call, fetching the data, whatever the data it is fetching, using that data as a props to this particular wrapped component, and this wrapped component it is using in this JSX. And finally, this component, this new enhanced components is getting returned from here, right? This is what we're doing. Now our use case is to get the data and pass the data to some kind of skeleton component, like this wrapped component, whatever the component get passed with, the skeleton component, so that that skeleton component can take advantage of this data and do anything with it. If your use case is something else, like you get this particular wrapped component over here and surround it with some other logic over here and then return, you do that. If your thing is like all the loading indicator, like before this component gets loaded, whether the data has got loaded correctly or the component got loaded correctly, all this logic you want to do in a single place, you can do that. So the purpose of higher order component is like something common, something reusable you want to do along with your input component. You are going to do that inside this, and finally the new enhanced component you are going to return. So in this case we are returning this with fetch at the end of it. Great, so far with me. So this is fine. Now this final thing is like with fetch does display name. This is optional, but it is good to set a display name, because at times in the React debugging tool, it is little difficult to kind of identify which higher order component we are working with. So in that case, if you are giving a display name, it is easy to identify, okay, this is the higher order component I am actually debugging right now. So it's easy to spot, right? That's the only purpose we are doing this. But net, the story that we told, just quickly recap. A simple JavaScript function takes any component, any React component, and it returns another new component, new enhanced component that uses this input component to anything that your business logic says. In our case, the business logic is making an API call, get the movies data and pass the movies data to this particular input component and render this input component. This is my objective. That is what I am doing. Now how am I going to use this? Okay, so let's see that part. So for that part, I have a movie list component created, and I'll be showing like how am I using it. Movie list is our plain old functional component we have seen in this series enough number of times. So this is a movie list. It takes a props. Okay, the props expects a movies object. It has this JSX value. The JSX value is nothing but a div, then a h2. And this movies, whatever the props that we are getting, it is expected to be an array. So we are mapping through it, and we are actually taking out each of the elements like poster, title, and going to kind of show that. That means if there are 10 movies into this movie object, this loop will iterate 10 times, and each of the movie object will have the poster, title information. We are going to show the poster and title information. This is very, very plain simple. But the tricky part is in this export. When I am exporting this movie list, what I am doing now, I am actually wrapping this with my higher order component. So if you see the higher order component, the with fetch, I am importing over here, and when I am exporting movie list, I am passing movie list as an argument to my with fetch function, the higher order component, and I am returning this. Now if I just break this one into these two lines instead of that, for example, const HOC equals to this line, and then if I do this both the things are same, right? Both the things are same. So what I am doing over here is nothing but I am passing this movie list component as an argument to the higher order component, and then getting a new enhanced component that this guy return. Remember the class component, this guy return. What it returns? It returns the JSX, which is having the same component along with the movies data passed as a props to this component. Remember? So we'll go there once. Movies data on the input component, movies data passed as a props. So if the input component is movie list, the HOC is having a JSX, basically that is having movies list passed with the movies list data that is got from the API call. That means it has a props. So that props we are getting over here, and we are actually going through it and doing all the logic, possible logic over here. Isn't that fantastic? It means in my app.js, if I just now import movie list and try to use movie list over there, like I import movie list and just try to use movie list, what I'll be seeing the movies are getting listed over there. So this is my movie list. If you see, all the movies are listed here, and I'm showing the cover and the title of the movie over here, so that my movie list component works fantastically over here. So you understood this entire context. Now if I want to use the same use fetch higher order function for another component, for suppose movie analytics, what I have to do? Same thing, exactly the same thing. I'll be creating a new component called movie analytics, which takes a props. Then I actually destructure the movies component from here, and here I'll be writing all the logic to show the table for the movie analytics, all the logic for doing like who is the director, how many movies he has done, all the data I'll be getting from this movies data already. So I can create table, I can create what sort of HTML element I'm looking for in that new component I can create. But while returning again, I will be passing that component, movie analytics component to with fetch to get a new enhanced component, and that enhanced component I'll be exporting from here. So how many ever new component I want to create, new presentational component I want to create, that is going to use the same data that my higher order component is fetching, I can very freely do it. I am not using this the data fetching logic that I have done here in the movie list at all. I am not going to use this with fetch data fetching logic into movie analytics component. I am not going to use that fetching logic into any other components. My presentational components are completely independent of the side effect. My presentational components are completely independent of data fetching altogether. That's the purpose, guys. That's the purpose of higher order component that we had, and that's how we used to do before hooks came into picture. I hope you got the point and you understood it. Don't forget to look into the code that written over here. The link is there in the description of this video, so that you can understand when you actually go through this video side by side. That will be really useful. So I hope you got the whole context of higher order component. Now, as we have hooks, as we have React hooks, if you have seen the previous videos, we have seen React hooks, we have written custom hooks. We have done exactly the same thing. We have taken out side effects, we have taken out reusable pieces into the different React hooks, and then we have actually used them elsewhere. That's the power, right, of the React hooks that we have understood. So as the React hooks have come into the picture, slowly the higher order component usage are kind of fading away. But there are high chances that you will encounter them in the code that are already written. People would not have refactored to use the hooks, or your interviewer might ask this question like, what is higher order component, what is the real use, and how we'll be using, can you write one higher order component? I hope this video clarified these things for you. Now before I end, I just want to recap everything once again, because people feel this is a bit tricky concept to understand, but this is really easy. So let me just recap everything once again in next 1 minute. So a higher order component is a plain old JavaScript function that takes an argument. The argument could be a component, and it returns a completely newly enhanced component. That newly enhanced component use the input component to do something that you would like to do. In our case, we wanted to enhance it with the movie data. That's the design. Instead of creating this movie data in each of the component, we are creating in a centralized space in the higher order component, and once the data is back, we are actually using the same input component and passing the movie data as a props in the JSX of this newly enhanced component, and finally returning this newly enhanced component. So it means any component that's going to use this higher order component, they will create their own JSX structure, assuming they will be getting a movies data structure, and this movies data structure will be passed to them as a props. How? Because before you export this particular component, you are passing it to our higher order component. Our higher order component is nothing but a function. This is like a function invocation which returns a JSX, where in our case exactly the same component along with the movie data that it is passing as a props. So that means this guy already getting a props. That is the props we are using over here. If you have another component like movie analytics, you will be doing the exactly same thing. You can use a different JSX to show different data that is coming into this movies data structure, guys. So that's the beauty of it. I hope you understood this one and you're going to make use of it. So if you have understood this concept, I want you to write what you understood in the comment section of this video. Please write about it. If you have any doubts, ask question. I make sure I am going to clarify this one. So friends, was it useful to you? If so, please like and share this video and provide the comments. I would like to know what is your understanding. So please let me know in the comment section like what you understood about higher order components. And if you have any further doubts, please ask about it in the comment section as well so that I can respond to it and you can learn it better. One more thing, I keep sharing the periodic quiz into the community channel. So don't forget to take that. The last quiz was about building a small application. Please go ahead and take that. It's still open. You can still take that. Thank you very much, Kashim Sheikh, who has already taken it and provided the required submissions. So thanks a lot for doing this. I hope that you had your own share of learning. All right. So before we end, I would like to request you to subscribe to the channel if you have not done yet. Next, we'll be coming up with another video from the React series. Until then, take a great care of yourself and keep learning. Thank you.